The shiur should be l'refuat Morin v'Rabbeinu Harav Menachem Yoshua ben Yair Eisenstock v'Achola Shlomit bat Chaya b'toch Sha'ar Cholei Yisrael. In Parashat Terumah, we start, maybe we could say, a new part of the Torah. We start from Parashat Terumah until the end of Sefer Vayikra, and there's one main topic, is the Mishkan. And as when we enter into the Mishkan, for most of us, it doesn't mean so much. What is the Aron? What is the Menorah? This is a Kli, that's a Kli. But Ezrat Hashem, what I want to try to do in the next two shiurim is really try and understand a little bit more. What are behind these Kelim? What does the Menorah resemble? What is the Mizbeach? What is the Aron? What are they saying to us even beyond the Mishkan, in the Avodat Hashem that we have in every single day? So the Kli I want to try and go into in Parashat Terumah is the Kli of the Menorah. There's an incredible Rashi about the Menorah that we'll try to understand. Rashi says, Megid shenitkasha Moshe b'maaseh hamenorah. Rashi says, according to the Midrash, the hardest kli for Moshe to build was the menorah. And obviously we ask ourselves, what was so hard about the menorah? So one answer could be that what was difficult about the menorah was that it was a miksha. That the menorah was built out of one part of gold. There was no connecting. You had to carve the menorah out of one solid piece of gold. But the question is, also the kruvim were a miksha. Also the chatzotzrot were a miksha. So it's difficult to say that the koshi, the difficulty of Moshe Rabbeinu, was because the menorah was miksha zahav. And Rashi's answer is, what did God do for the koshi of Moshe? Ad shehir'a lo hakadosh baruch hu menorah shel esh. The answer to Moshe's difficulty is a menorah of fire. And I want to try to go through the Sefat Emet and the psukim about the menorah to truly understand what is behind this idea of Rashi in the difficulty of the menorah. So says the Sefat Emet, in the year 1893, Be'inyan HaMenorah. What was the menorah all about? Shlosha kanei menorah mitzida ha'echad. Ki hu romez לבחינת השבת שבו מתגלה אור התורה. לכן יש בו קריאת התורה ומתפשט הארת התורה לכל ששת ימי המעשה. The Sefat Emet says the menorah was the combination of Shabbat and the 6 days of the week. The Sefat Emet says that on Shabbat we read the Torah every Shabbat in Shul because the light of the Torah, the light of the menorah is specifically on Shabbat. But there's an incredible thing to ask ourselves. What is the menorah? And usually someone will say to you the menorah has 7 branches. And the answer is, if we look in the psukim, that they are totally wrong. There are not 7 branches in the menorah. Now we're going to go look at the psukim to see what was the menorah and what was the menorah built from. So we see here the psukim of the menorah. Right? Veshisha kanim yotzim mitzideha. There are 6 branches that leave the sides of the menorah. Shlosha kanei menorah mitzida ha'echad. Shlosha kanei menorah mitzida ha'sheni. The 6 is perfectly divided 3 and 3 on both sides. Shlosha gvi'im meshukadim b'kaneh ha'echad kaftor v'ferach ken l'sheshet ha'kanim ha'yotzim min ha'menorah. If we look at these at the beginning, we'll see one number. The idea of 6. Shisha kanim hayotzim min ha'menorah. Yotzim mitzideha. The idea of the 6 branches are that they leave the menorah. What was the menorah? Was only the centerpiece. Uba menorah, the middle piece, arba'a gvi'im meshukadim kaftorea uprachea. The menorah is only one. The menorah is only the middle part of the structure of the menorah. There's one menorah and shisha kanim. And we see that division, that the menorah not only in the vessel, but also in the psukim, we see the 3 branches, and the menorah in the middle. And we see again in the kaftorim, kaftor tachat shnei kanim mimena, v'kaftor tachat shnei kanim mimena, v'kaftor tachat shnei kanim mimena. You ask yourself, why is it so important to repeat that there's 2 kanim mimena? Just say that there's 6 kanim. It's to create that division, that the kanim are separated. Mimena, there's a centerpiece, which is the menorah. Mimena, mimena, mimena. And the other parts separate. And the ending, l'sheshet hakanim, again, hayotzim min ha'menorah. So when we look at the psukim, we see an incredible idea in the structure of the kli. The kli separates between the menorah that's in the middle and the shisha kanim. It creates a division between 1 and 6. There is no 7 in these psukim. You won't find it. It's true in the Nerot. Vehela neroteha shiv'ah. But in the structure of the kli, it says there's 6 and 1. And they're separated from each other. And they're different than each other in the psukim and in the kli. Now I want to try to go back to the Sefat Emet and to Rashi to understand truly what was the difficulty of Moshe, and what is the Sefat Emet teaching us through the menorah. I think if we continue from this building of the psukim themselves of Maaseh HaMenorah, we could understand Rashi in such a deep level. Rashi says, Moshe nitkasha b'maaseh hamnorah. Rashi emphasizes that the structure of the menorah bothered Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I do not want hayotzim, I don't want this separation of one Shabbat and then 6 days that aren't Shabbat. That's what Moshe nitkashe b'maaseh hamnorah. Moshe says, I am a person who went up to Ma'amad Har Sinai. I lived like an angel. I myself lived in a world that was totally Shabbat, that was 100% perfect. Why do we need Sheshet Yimei HaMaaseh? Why do we need a complex reality? Why can't we just have a reality of Emet, a reality of oneness? Says the Sefat Emet, so deep, he says that the middle is Or HaTorah, umitpashet l'sheshet yimei ha'maaseh. Says the Sefat Emet, if you want to understand the structure, it's that if you don't have the 6 days of the week, the 6 separated branches, then you cannot take yourself to take the light of Shabbat and bring it to the 6 days. But I think this is where Rashi becomes so incredible. It's hard for Moshe Rabbeinu to understand the structure of the menorah. How does God answer him? Says Rashi, Her'alo menorat esh. God showed him a menorah of fire. And if we think about it, what is Hashem saying to Moshe? He's saying to him, when you have a torn reality, when you have a complex division between 2 different concepts, it could create destruction because fire could destroy, but it could create the deepest ability to perfect the world. The best reality is the menorah. Because the fire, true, that if there is 6 days of the week, people could forget Shabbat. People could forget because of the reality they live in. The depth of that one little menorah in the middle. But if they're able to understand the depth, they're able to connect to the middle piece, then they become not only one, they could go so far. They could go not only to 2 branches, to 4, to 6, to the entire world. So Hashem is saying to Moshe, the division is the ability. It's not the disability. It's not that because we can't handle Shabbat, we have 6 days. Because Shabbat is so deep, it enables the 6 other branches. To understand this, there was one morning in the army where I was doing Shmirah from 2 to 5 o'clock in the morning. And I don't know if you could imagine, but after many months of guarding on your own, you get tired. And so you start thinking of something to think about. And so I thought about a Gemara that says that the redemption of Am Yisrael is like the sunrise. And the Gemara says, the same way the sun rises slowly, the Geula comes slowly. But I was trying to think deeper, why is the redemption of Am Yisrael like the sunrise? And I was looking out, it was about 4:30 in the morning, and I see suddenly the sun starting to rise. And I saw something miraculous. I looked and I thought to myself, 10 minutes ago, the sky was dark. And in 10 more minutes, it will all be light. There's only one time in the reality of the world that we see more than one color in the sky. And that's the sunrise. The sunrise, the moments that stand in between the night and the day are the only time where there's many colors. There's orange and red and darker red and purple, beautiful. But what is sunrise? Sunrise is saying there are two opposite realities. There's the night and there's the day. There's dark and there's light. But there's a moment where they connect. There's a moment where they become together. And so if there is a separated reality, you're the one who could connect them. That is the redemption of Am Yisrael. Not to only have one way. And when we look around and we see there are different ways of Judaism, there are different people in the world, then we get a little bit maybe upset, maybe saddened. The menorah says the light of the Torah, the ability of the Torah to go far is specifically through the differences. If you think that a connection is done by two people who are the same, says the menorah, the true light is to accept the differences, is to understand that the differences are a building point in the world. To summarize the idea, we try to understand what the menorah is about. What was so hard for Moshe? We saw in the Psukim that we could feel in the Psukim the difference between the menorah and the Shisha Kanim. And Moshe doesn't want this separation. He wants the world to be one, to be miksha without a difference. And Hashem says to him, you should understand that the ability of Shabbat is not to just stay in Shabbat, but it's to bring it down into the 6 days of the week. And so we should all be zoche be'ezat Hashem. When we meet differences within ourselves, in the reality that we live in, not to run away from the difference, not to get scared of the differences, but to see that when there's two, there's a higher ability to create a better, perfected Torah and a perfected world. Shabbat Shalom.